Welcome back. It is now quarter past the hour. A short while ago, we brought you some breaking news about sanctions against Russia, and some of that breaking news we're going to check in with our Kevin Corke, who's traveling with the president. We're getting some reaction now from the White House about a report that 35 Russian diplomats could be getting kicked out of the United States. Kevin, what can you tell us?
Yeah, it's actually broader than that, and what we wanted to be careful about was trying this idea of removing diplomatic staff from one nation because you have to be careful. Clearly, that could have been a story in and of itself. We've heard about diplomatic harassment of American diplomats abroad, and so that in and of itself was not necessarily declarative. What we can tell you, however, is you're right. This is all part and parcel to a larger issue, also accusing the Russian government of cyber hacking. I'm going to read part of the president's statement, and it reads this way. Today, I have ordered a number of actions in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election. These actions follow repeated private and public warnings that we have issued to the Russian government and are a necessary and appropriate response to efforts to harm U.S. interests in violation of established international norms of behavior. And it goes on to say, and it's fairly lengthy, and I won't read it all to you, but I can tell you this. It talks at great length about some of the ideas that the Russians, at the very highest level of Russian government, were behind the cyber attacks that impacted the U.S. election in 2016. And as Reuters has been reported, and as our Lucas Tomlinson and others, Matt Dean and our staff have been confirming, that means a number of Russian diplomats will be moving on from American facilities, or facilities based here in America, including one in New York and one in Maryland, we are told, that will be shuttered. We'll keep following this story for you, Heather, as I continue to hear from senior administration officials. I'll pass it along to you, but for now, back to you.
All right, Kevin, do we know what kind of facilities these are? You mentioned ones in New York and Maryland. Are these some of the like weekend camps that they sometimes have, or are these sort of consulate-type buildings?
Yeah, you're right on the money. These annexes are typically not utilized on a daily basis, but they certainly can be. When you talk about camps, in case people have not seen these, or they maybe have driven by and didn't know exactly what they were, often these encampments are for high-level dignitaries who come into town. It's not the same as a consulate per se, but these are major facilities, and it sends a very strong and declarative message to the Russian government that cyber attacks, especially those that impact our infrastructure, in this case the American election, won't be tolerated.
Yeah, and Kevin, I understand that it may be premature to ask this question, but I'll ask you anyway since we do have you. The people who are intended to be kicked out, do we know if they had any involvement with this hacking?
Great question. I've been in constant consultation with senior administration officials at the very highest level. And while they're very cautious not to say that is the case, I can tell you just based on conversations I've had, it is not a surprise if they do feel that way, although I've yet to confirm that. Heather?
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, Kevin Corke, we'll check in with you as news warrants. Thanks for that great reporting that broke. A Fox News alert on a very busy news day. The Obama administration making good on its vow to retaliate against Russia for hacking, issuing a set of 9 different sanctions. The Treasury Secretary has now designated 2 Russian individuals for using cyber-enabled means. 35 Russian operatives have now been ordered to leave the United States. 2 diplomatic compounds related to Russian intelligence gathering, we are told, are now being closed. One is in Maryland and one is in New York. They'll be shuttered at noon tomorrow. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI releasing declassified technology information on Russian civilian and military intelligence. That's the latest news that we're getting in on this matter. Let's talk with Guy Benson. He's a political editor of townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. And Brad Bauman is a Democratic strategist and a partner at the Pastorum Group. He's the former executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Let's start with you, Brad. What do you think about this idea that the administration is now issuing these sanctions against the Russians? We knew that this might happen, but is it appropriate for them to do it just 3 months or 3 weeks before Donald Trump comes into office?
Absolutely, it's appropriate, and this is a strong response, and I want to thank President Obama and the administration for taking these necessary steps. We've been saying all along that Russia has attempted to influence the American people, have attempted to manipulate us, and this goes well beyond the stated and normal ways in which intelligence is conducted around the world.
All right.
So I do believe it's appropriate.
All right, so Guy, you know, it sounds like a big deal, expelling 35 diplomats and closing down 2 of these residential compounds, which, by the way, is kind of where these folks just go on the weekend if they want a cushy place to lay their head or something. But are they handcuffing the next administration? Is the point to handcuff the Donald Trump administration into having sort of a tougher relationship with Russia from the get-go?
I don't necessarily think so. I believe it's appropriate for the current president to take action. The Russians did not hack the election, but they did try to influence it, according to our intelligence agencies. That's not acceptable. No American should countenance that. And so the administration is doing something, although I'm not really sure that this would be a very strong response. Yes, it's a big move publicly. There's some PR here. But I just saw our colleague here at Fox News, Julie Rodzinski, who, of course, is a liberal Democrat. She called this move by the administration weak and said it didn't go after Putin or his inner circle. So sort of a slap on the wrist. I guess better than nothing, but not exactly tough stuff.
Okay. So, again, we're just getting in this information, so it may be incomplete at this time. I want to caution folks right now. But one of the things that we had heard about was the potential that the U.S. could cyber attack Russia or do something stronger, such as go at Vladimir Putin and his finances. Brad, what do you think about that idea? Should we have done something stronger instead?
Well, let's be clear that these measures are being done in concert with 2 years of sanctions that we've already imposed on Russia, which have affected
that certainly
Putin.
did not stop them from trying to interfere with our election.
That's absolutely correct. It did not stop them, but it is hurting them, and it is hurting Putin, and that's one of the reasons why he did this. So, given the fact that this is being done in concert with that, I think it's fair to say that this is, in fact, an escalation. And yes, if you ask me, I do believe that there is room to do more and that we should be doing more.
Our panel now, Julie Rodzinski is a Democratic strategist and a Fox News contributor, Boyd Matheson, a Republican strategist, and the former chief of staff to the Republican senator from Utah, Mike Lee. Boyd, I want to start with you. The U.S. response, 9 individuals or organizations sanctioned, 4 of them individual officers of one of the Russian intelligence agencies, along with 3 companies that apparently do business with Russia. How would you assess the overall severity of this move by the White House?
Well, I think it's very serious in diplomatic circles. This is basically one step below kicking out the ambassador to the country. So it's very serious in those terms. The fact that these folks have 72 hours to leave the country is a pretty significant signal to the Russians from the Obama administration. Although it's a very odd coming from the Obama administration. They've been really all over the map with Russia, starting with a very pompous Secretary Kerry talking about the reset and a lecture back several years ago. So they seem to be very inconsistent. The timing is very interesting, but the severity in terms of the political circles is definitely real. Yeah,
there are 35 Russian intelligence operatives getting kicked out of the U.S. No doubt they have diplomatic cover for what they do, but we call them intelligence operatives. Julie, what about that? What about the whole Russian reset thing and the hot mic moment where President Obama said he was going to have more flexibility after his re-election, which ultimately did take place? Why are things so poisonous with the Russians right now?
Well, there's one common denominator, right? George Bush came in, said he looked into Vladimir Putin's soul and saw a good person there. Barack Obama, it was actually Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, so wanted to do the reset. Now we have President-elect Trump praising Vladimir Putin. The common denominator is this. They will always be led down by Vladimir Putin because Vladimir Putin is an authoritarian despot who longs for the days of the Soviet Union's greatness and considers the West to be the perfect foil for convincing his own people who are struggling economically and living in an increasingly repressive regime that all their problems stem not from his policies but from the West. And so the West will always be the red flag for the Russians to use against their own people, or at least for Vladimir Putin. I will say this about the sanctions. They are, and I don't even call them sanctions, I don't know what this is, I call it a disgraceful and weak move by the Obama administration. Lindsey Graham is absolutely right. What Congress needs to do, I don't have any confidence that President-elect Trump would sign this into law, but I would hope that President Obama would have done this. He failed to do that, which is go after Vladimir Putin and his inner circle economically. That is the only language Vladimir Putin understands. He only understands if you go after the billions of dollars in assets that he has shielded in the West and around the world. The oligarchs that prop him up and surround him have assets all over Western Europe and in the United States, including real estate fortunes and also personal fortunes in equity markets in London and the New York Stock Exchange. Freeze those assets, go after them in the pocketbook. It is the only language Putin understands. Throwing out a bunch of quote-unquote diplomats who are really intelligence agents, that's what we used to do during the Cold War. Each side did that to the other. It doesn't make any difference. They'll send new ones in. Punishing the Russian intelligence services by banning them from coming here? Okay, great. What does that do to Vladimir Putin or the oligarchs who are threatening the Russian people and the West with their reprehensible behavior? This is a weak and feckless move by the Obama administration, and I am disgusted with how weak it is.
They also, the White House, put out a statement saying that we will continue to take a variety of actions at a time and place of our choosing, some of which will not be publicized. Boyd, I suppose it's possible there could be some things going on here that we won't hear about or we'll hear about after the fact. But there are many people who think that Donald Trump would not take as tough a line against the Russians as Barack Obama has. Do you think that this will perhaps change his thinking?
It's really going to put President-elect Trump into a box. It's really an interesting dilemma for him coming into office. And I don't think it's helpful to the interests of the country that suddenly he's going to be faced with, does he remove the sanctions that President Obama just inserted? And if he does that, is he signaling that he is good friends with Vladimir Putin and things are going to be different? Or is he going to be more hardline and show American strength and some of the things that Julie talked about in terms of really defending those interests? And so you have this really interesting quandary where the Obama administration, who even just a few months ago refused to put some travel restrictions on some agents, even as it was advised to them by the FBI and Congress, saying they didn't want to provoke Russia in any way. And now they're putting these kinds of things on as they walk out the door, setting up a really interesting and very difficult scenario for an incoming administration that many people have criticized on the foreign policy front.
Julie, we have less than a minute left, but you know, the White House has said that these actions have been going on for a long time. Why slap these sanctions on with just 3 weeks left in the Obama term? Well,
first of all, if you remember, we did slap something called the Magnitsky Act and a bunch of sanctions on the Russians a long time ago in response to what they were doing in suppression of the press and killing, frankly, journalists that were writing stories that were less than complimentary about Vladimir Putin. It has prevented a lot of the people that I talked about from doing business in the West. We need to up that pressure. That was the right strategy to do. The Obama administration was on the right track, along with Congress and people like John McCain and others who, in a bipartisan manner, were doing the right thing on this. Sadly, anything that Barack Obama does through executive order now could be easily overturned starting on January 20th by the next president. That's why it's so important for Congress to act. I have no confidence or hope or expectation that they can act in the next 10, 20 days. But if there is any way to get this codified into law, and to have these sanctions like the Magnitsky Act expanded that targets specifically not the Russian people, but the oligarchs and Vladimir Putin, that's what needs to be done. Any executive order now, I have no confidence will ever be upheld by a man who's praised Vladimir Putin to the stars and thinks he's a great leader to emulate in many ways.
Julie Roginski and Boyd Matheson, thank you both.
Thank you.